Welcome to episode 6 of the Kyero Pro Podcast, the podcast for estate agents in Spain. I'm joined by an illustrious panel of experts today, and today we're going to be talking about lead follow-up. In the first 5 episodes, we talked about the foreign buyer market, we talked about lead gen in general, we looked at portals, SEO, pay-per-click. And now in this episode, this is where the rubber hits the road, because there's just no point generating leads if you're not going to follow up. So if you've skipped all the other episodes and this is the one you listen to, this is really where you make the most of your marketing money. So let me introduce our guests, and I'll give them a little moment to introduce themselves. Alfredo, let's start with you.
I'm a marketing consultant, work with real estate agents mostly in the Costa del Sol, and have done since 2012.
Thank you, Alfredo. Good to have you here again. Ash, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm an AI consultant. I'm new to Costa del Sol, reasonably new, and real estate since the past couple of years. I got involved, but my background is a sales professional, and I come from like 20 years digital transformation and project management, kind of digital agency work from London.
Cool. Thanks, Ash. Great to have you here. And Jamie, how about you?
I'm involved in real estate. I've been an estate agent since 2003, and I've had my own agency, which I sold a few years ago. I'm now involved in a couple of agencies, and also I provide training and consultancy to agencies in London and in Spain.
So actually, coincidentally, Kyero started in 2003 as well, Jamie. And for the last 23 years, we've heard the same thing from agents, that either they're not getting enough leads, or that when they're getting leads, the lead quality is bad. And tonight, I'd like to dive into that, because when an agent follows up with a lead, how do they know whether it's good or bad? How do they judge that? And that's assuming agents are following up on the leads in the first place. Well, you hear from buyers that 50% of the time, they don't hear back from an agent when they send an inquiry. And I know that's not unique to Spain. I hear the same thing in the UK. So I think today we want to look at follow-up and what that process looks like. But let's start with you, Alfredo, and thinking about the foreign buyer market in particular. How important is speed to follow up? Is that important at all? Because it's a long process.
I have to be careful how I answer this, because if you Google this, it's going to say speed to leads, the most important things, and sliced bread and all that. I think speed to respond is important. I think how you respond varies depending on a whole bunch of factors. As if you ask for something and you don't get it, every minute that passes, particularly if you've asked it from someone else that isn't your competition, then the chances are they'll get it to them first. So I think speed to lead in its essence is essential. But that speed may not necessarily be, it has to be 30 seconds is what I'm trying to say. It has to be appropriate speed.
Okay. And given time differences, buyers inquiring at the weekend or out of hours, what's a realistic target for an agent to aim at?
It depends on the inquiry. That's what I'm saying. Right? It'd be nice to say, there's loads of stats if you Google that says that you got X percentage chance of closing a deal if you do it within the first 30 seconds, and it drops by X percent if you do it within 5 minutes, etc. There's lots of stats of that, which on a generalization basis sort of suggests you got to be fast. But I think it just depends entirely. You have to understand, there's an author called Trish Berluzzi or something like that, and her basic point is that not all leads are created equal. And so therefore the follow-up has to be appropriate to what the person making the inquiry is reasonably expecting to happen in a timely manner. And then I guess we will talk about the rest of the points of the follow-up. But really, this speed to reaction is probably a more correct term to use in this. You have to react quickly. Now that reaction may involve doing something a day later, or might do it 2 seconds later, and how you go about it. Then that's the nuances of omni-channel follow-up, and it just depends on the lead.
Thanks, Alfredo. Ash, thinking about potential buyers making an inquiry out of hours or over the weekend or wherever they are in their time zone, how much of this can be automated, and particularly now with AI, and how much of it really needs to be human?
Okay, yeah, that is a big topic. So the short answer is all of it can be automated. But of course, there's different types of automation. When we're talking to sophisticated, high net worth and high value product, of course, it needs to be right. And I think Alfredo mentioned very, very right. It's not about just the speed to lead, but how you respond to it in terms of the personalized value. Is there value in that response, or is just thank you for your inquiry? Because just saying thank you for your inquiry, a kind of dumb automation, is not going to add a lot of value. It can even harm you. But a really sophisticated, personalized automation, let's say in real estate. So if a lead is coming in and they've entered some detail about what they're looking for example, 2-bed or 3-bed house in Estepona, then if that first touch within 5 minutes, and in fact, there's a 5-minute rule that it says is a big uplift in conversion if you respond within 5 minutes, because the user is in their peak kind of attention and interest level in their mind is in that topic. So if you send some value based, and of course we can go into more details how we do it actually and how we see in real terms, I can share that. But in a high level, yes, it needs to be some kind of value based. So here are the brochure that you asked for, your name, and this is specifically for 3-bed houses in Estepona. Then that's a smart value based, personalized, fast response, which I think people are gonna appreciate.
So the personalization side of it is important by the sound of it.
Exactly, and that's where AI comes in, because that's where AI can personalize and be smart about it like a human, as opposed to very fixed robotic answers or the old-fashioned bots.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've definitely seen both, which is a couple of line autoresponder that basically says, "Hey, I know how to set up an autoresponder," and there's the other one you get, which is fill in this vast questionnaire of all the questions we might want to ask you. I was like, I'm not going to do either of those. So, Jamie, thinking about the personalization aspect and the speed to reply, what's the goal of that first response from your point of view, and what are the mistakes that agents make?
I think part of the mistakes is founded in the expectations that agents place on the lead a lot of the time, and they market to the lead that they would like to have rather than the lead that they've actually got, because as agents, we'd all love to get leads from people that are just sitting with their phone in their hand, with the money in the bank, dying to buy the property that they've seen on the portal. And, that just doesn't happen. That just, those buyers are maybe 2 in 100, that come through in that kind of fashion. And the majority, so at least over 95% of the people that inquire will not be ready. And we have to make the expectation that they would have also inquired to more people than just us. So, these inquiries, we have to expect that they've gone to at least, I always like to think 5 agents at least that they've inquired to, and that it's not a ready buyer that's picked out this property and saying, I want to buy that. It's someone that's expressing an interest that they potentially might be interested in buying this property. And they're submitting their details and giving us the opportunity to impress them with what we have and who we are, which would allow us to take that to the next step. And like Alfredo said, it's exactly right. Is the correct response. Some leads require a phone call straight away. Other leads, a phone call straight away could be the worst thing you could do, because they press the button, and if they're in a stage where they're in a research stage, because the intent will vary from the leads. You have high intent leads, but the majority will be low to medium intent leads. So you have to market accordingly to the level of intent that you've got. And a lot of agents, it's natural to think that we want the leads that we really need. We want to sell these properties. We need to sell these properties. And we place a lot of expectations on the inquiries that we're getting, that these people are the answers to our problems and that they're going to buy these properties. But a lot of the time, these buyers are not at that stage. So we have to market to them correctly. And that first sort of aim of that first contact is to impress the people. It's our chance to impress. So what we want to do is, if they've inquired to 5 other people, we want to make sure that they're impressed with what we have to say and how we come across to them, be that an email, be that via WhatsApp, or whatever way we're doing it, or a mixture, but it has to impress them, basically.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've made some notes there. I really like the first thing you said, market to the lead they've actually got, not the one they wish they had.
Yeah.
That sounds spot on. And that 95% of leads not being ready, is that a fairly reasonable number, a fairly reasonable guesstimate, do you think?
I think the agents would love to have a lead, and I would love these leads. Any business that I work with love these leads, where it's what I always say, round peg, round hole. So they come in for this property, they've inquired for that property, they know the area, or they live in the area, or they've holidayed in the area, they know the building, and they want to buy that property. They're ready, they've got their money in the bank, and they know everything. They just want to go and see it. You have to take them, show them. I would say that is probably 1 to 2% of leads that actually come in like that. That very rarely happens in agency. Normally someone will come in from one property or one sort of inquiry, and they'll end up buying something very different at a date which might be very different to the date that they inquired from. Especially in overseas properties, the time difference, the life cycle of the lead is a lot longer than sort of, if you're dealing with somebody who's moving from one street to another street within the same town.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I picked up on what you said as well, the intent varies. So given that, if I can stick with you, Jamie, what does a good structure look like that sort of accommodates all of these variables, varying intent, maybe not being ready? What does it say a 30-day plan look like once a lead comes in?
Well, Alfredo and I had an interesting chat about this actually, and I was saying that part of the problem that we have is that the whole agency model, as far as the brokers are concerned, is that they're motivated and rewarded for selling properties tomorrow. So they are low basic or no basic, very high commission. So the prize is you want something that can happen quickly and something that can close quickly. So brokers become very good at sifting out those buyers. So, when you have the leads coming in, and it's the brokers are motivated in this way, so we can't blame the brokers for doing this because the whole reward system is geared towards finding those buyers. And the agency likes that too, because the agencies, we have bills to pay, cash flow, you need commission quickly. So we all put a big emphasis on buyers that are ready now. But you have to measure the intent, and the company has to own that process. So you cannot leave it in the hands of the brokers, because the brokers are motivated in an opposite way. The brokers are motivated to sift inquiries and find buyers that are ready and willing to buy in the near term. The buyers that are then ready to buy in a long term, you can sift those into different levels of intent, given where they are in the process. And some of them won't want to talk to you. Actually, a fair amount of them will not want to talk to you. But you have to have a process set up which can deal with every level of intent. And the business needs to own those processes rather than the brokers. The business has to be the one that has the process and the systems in place to deal with the follow-up for all the varying levels of intent.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And is that what's behind sort of agents giving up too early on a lead and declaring it bad because they're not ready to buy today?
It is, and it's incredibly hard to nurture a group of buyers. If, let's say, for instance, we're generating 10 leads a day, and we've already established that a large number of those are not going to be ready. It's an incredibly difficult job, manpower-wise, to organize the follow-up, a manual follow-up of all of these buyers. And the buyers can change their buying temperature very quickly as well. The big problem we have is that the buyers don't run like a linear line where we can say, right, okay, he will be ready in 6 months, he will be ready in 8 months. Buyers reach that buying temperature and then they buy straight away, especially high ticket. They do a high ticket overseas buyers might be quite impulsive. And when they're ready, they might be waiting for something to happen in the country that they're in. They're doing the research, and all of a sudden when they're ready and they strike and buy. So it's really important to have a nurturing process that keeps you close to these buyers, but it's incredibly difficult to do manually. You have to have a sort of systemized process approach to it, which runs in conjunction with the brokers, basically.
So I'm going into a how-to sort of detail, really, because that does sound incredibly difficult to do and to automate and be personalized. So what's that sort of interplay between the broker trying to figure out whether this person is closable now, and then the system in the background nurturing the buyer until they're ready to buy? How does that sort of interplay work?
The first thing you want to do is qualify a buyer. So, every real estate business will have a cost per lead. So your CPL, which is your cost per lead. And then you'll have your cost per qualified lead. So your CPQL, so your cost per qualified lead. So that's your first sort of metric that you want to work on. So your first thing is trying to get the buyers qualified. And like I mentioned, not all of them will be willing to let you qualify them. Like you mentioned earlier, you can't just send people a big form with all of this information that me as the broker would like to have. I'd love to have all this information. You have to try and gear it in a way where it's value based, where the buyers are going to get something out of it. What's in it for them? What are they gaining from doing this, and why should they do it with you when there's plenty of other choices out there? So it's about trying to get to that point where you can understand the intent as early as possible in the process. And a lot of it you can understand by their behavior, by how they interact with you, by how they might ask some basic questions that you can ask. But trying to gauge intent early is really important.
Let me jump over to you, Ash, because it sounds like this system in the background, this nurturing process is really important, and we're going to need to automate as much of it as we can. What can you tell us about sort of simple automations that any agent should be using now?
Traditionally, simple automation is newsletters. Any CRM has an email element to it. So as you probably sign up to any property website, you're going to get emails. So that's in terms of nurturing, I would say that's the most basic, probably most people are doing, where you receive email newsletters. It could be weekly, it could be monthly. Sometimes it could be like new property has become available. So there's the hot list of hot properties or new developments, updates. Now, the next step, of course, any CRM has this, is segmentation. You want to make it a bit more relevant based on that initial detail you have about the lead, their country, their language, their interests, what they're looking for, so you can actually send more relevant. And that all requires also a lot of setup and time to kind of properly configure it in the CRM. So that, I would say, traditionally the simplest is just email nurture sequences is what most businesses do. But of course, now with AI, I think we can do it a lot better.
Okay, tell us about that. What do you layer AI on top of that, or is it something completely separate?
Well, I think what I'm most looking into is pretty much you don't even need to layer on top of it. AI can replace it. So what we are doing with some of my clients and with my company, we are building AI agents. What an AI agent is and why we call them agents, and incidentally, that's the same name, of course, as a sales agent in real estate. But why we call them agent, because now essentially it has some decision-making power. It's not just a fixed rule-based automation, and it can mimic like what a human sales agent would do. So that's the whole premise or promise of AI agents. In a more practical terms, how can we use it? So for example, I want to also distinguish when we talk about follow-up. For me, there's two types of follow-ups. We're talking about nurture sequence. So when we're talking about nurturing, typically it's a lead that you have had some contact with, but they're not ready to buy yet. So you need to nurture them until they're ready to buy. But there is another type of follow-up, which is the lead that has come in. You've called them, you've messaged them, they haven't responded yet. So there is that follow-up until you get the first contact. So there's two types of follow-up, which in my company, we help real estate companies automate. One is that first contact. Again, it's a speed to lead, but also if they don't respond with the first contact, with AI also, you can send a WhatsApp message, you can send SMS, you can even have AI to call them. If they're not responding, then you need to follow up. Next day, call them again or send a WhatsApp message. WhatsApp, we found, is the most efficient. We've had most success. So send a WhatsApp message, second day, third day, and sometimes, fifth day, they respond. So that's the kind of first follow-up, which is getting them, is pre-contact, we can say, actually getting a response from them or to book an appointment. And then after you've spoken with them, or maybe they just responded on WhatsApp, then it's the nurturing. If they're not ready, for the sales agent, like Jamie said, their focus is going to be sift through who's ready to do viewings now, their focus is going to be on that. But the ones that maybe 3 months, 6 months down the line, they have a house to sell, they're investigating, that's where we need to kind of do the nurturing. And now that we have some information about what they're looking for, what the AI can do, AI can essentially have access, like a person, like a human salesperson, access to all the information in the CRM, and then send them more personalized messages, more than just using their name, but actually whatever information we have about what they're interested in, their timeline. If they need to sell a house, they said we're selling a house in 3 months' time. In 3 months' time, then the AI agent is firing a WhatsApp message saying, hey, how's the house sale going in London? Or are you still in the property? I've got some good properties I can show you if you're still looking. So that's a very, very personalized, relevant message. It's like, again, what a good salesperson would do. But they won't do it because it is a tedious, as you previously mentioned, it's a very tedious manual process, and it's not money today, so it's hard to kind of stay on top of. That's where I think AI can do a really good job in terms of following up and nurturing with very relevant one-to-one sort of fully personalized messages that actually adds value. And that's why this is going to be much better than a generic newsletters that currently are sent, in my view anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of newsletters as a form of nurturing. People are not interested in what your company's doing, and like a generic, just bore this. Most of the people you would deal with have content overload. So they're bombarded with content everywhere they go. They're very, very busy, and to use a newsletter as a form of nurturing or expect results from just doing that, you've got to have the whole picture. And email sequences as well do not work, because you can't just rely on a basic email sequence, because all of these people will be slightly different in the different stages, and peppering people with property just turns them off. And look, you've got to include property because that's what it's about. But for someone to buy from you, they have to love you, the company, and the product. So if they believe in you and the company and the product, you're onto a winner. And that's what you're nurturing and your follow-up. So your first response, and then your second response, your whole program, your whole process has to achieve those things, basically. So and it's very hard to do that with just one of these things alone. It has to be the whole picture, basically. And if automation is not done very well, people smell it a mile away, and it becomes, if someone's time poor, which most of our clients or prospective clients are, it can be a quick turn off. If someone's, you can instantly know, I've been stuck into an email flow and I'm getting emails where they're very low value to me. So this is just and that is a very negative response then to the company, and it doesn't sell you, it doesn't sell the company. So it is a very tricky job to do, but it's one that can be done.
Right. So the content itself has to be right, but how do you figure out the right frequency? I mean, we've talked about sort of underserving and overserving, and some people might not want to call, and Ash said WhatsApp works. How do you figure out the mix that's going to work for that particular lead?
I think the intent is something that you can gauge from how they respond. So you can touch email and WhatsApp and see where someone wants to sort of converse with you, where they're going to respond quicker. And depending on the intent or the level of inquiry, then you can use the phone. And a lot of people, I think, when you mentioned earlier, Martin, people said they were never responded to. I think a lot of the time the agents do respond, but they phone from a number that the people don't know. A lot of people don't answer unknown numbers. And then they never follow up with an email or a WhatsApp. So then they think, I was never contacted. So I think that kind of, if you can put something early to gauge then how they want to correspond with you, and always look at it from the thing of what's in it for them, what's in it for, because we all think that way, what's in it for me. So they're going to be thinking the same way. So if we can put something in which gets their interest and they know there's something in it for them from the early stages, then we can then figure out their intent and then play it accordingly from there with how frequently we market to them.
If I put my agent hat on, not that I've ever worn an agent hat, but I'm kind of confused now, because I need to automate this stuff, but it needs to be personalized. So where do those two things sort of overlap?
I think it's the different type of content you send, and I'm sure Ash has experienced this as well, that some content needs to come from the company, and some content needs to come from the broker, and it can still come from the broker and be automated through the CRM and still, or the system that you use. But I think the key is that you have to try and get something out on a couple of fronts as quickly as possible, in a way that will allow you to then engage further with that client to try and move forward to that qualification. Because a load of applicants that you're just sending emails to with no clue of what they really want, or no idea of who they really are, is actually of very little value to you. So you want to be, everything you're doing at the initial stage is building to try and get them on the phone or onto a meeting so you can qualify them properly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And coming back to you, Ash, I'm guessing that there's a role for AI agents in this scenario to figure out the right type of response or the right type of content and the frequency. Is that accurate?
Yes, 100%. And personally, I think also the current, if you look at how currently CRMs work, that's going to change a lot, because it's a bit almost outdated to me. Like what's emerging now are AI CRMs, and they're going to be much smarter and remove a lot of the manual, tedious work that salespeople hate to do, which is why they don't update their CRMs. And if you don't have the right information against that lead record or contact record, then you cannot really be smart about the follow-up, because all the information, all the activity, previous contacts, everything needs to be there. And I know it's talking to a lot of agents here, and from my previous sales experience, that's one area a lot of salespeople don't do. They don't update the CRM. They're a people's person. They want to be out there talking, doing viewings, meeting people, selling. They hate admin. That's where I think CRM, the new emerging AI CRMs, and in fact, I'm developing one myself, is going to do a lot of that work with you. Like Jamie mentioned, okay, we need to measure their intent. Now, any good, I've been a sales coach as well. There's a lot of psychology in terms of every interaction, the way they interact, what they write, whether it is WhatsApp, call, SMS, how quickly they respond. Everything is a signal in terms of scoring this lead, their temperature, their intent. And AI is good at analyzing that data. As long as we capture that data into the CRM, as long as the communication is tracked, is logged in the CRM, or preferably done from a well set up CRM, you make your calls from the CRM, so the call transcript is there. You make your WhatsApp from CRM, send, so the history of all WhatsApp messages are there, and so all the email communication. So all the information is there. Now, as a human, looking at my HubSpot and all the activity, if everything is logged properly, going through it and analyze it, if it was from 6 months ago, 9 months ago, it's a lot of data. Perhaps that takes time. Now, AI is great at that, analyzing data and quickly give you a summary and scoring the lead. Okay, this is, I think, his highest score, or you can score them by temperature, warm, cold, warm, hot, or you can measure their intent and buying signals. Again, AI can monitor all that as long as everything is logged into the CRM. And the login itself, again, can be automated with the new emerging AI CRMs, which will do part of that work for you, so you don't have to rely on manual entry and updating statuses and all that stuff.
It sounds like the CRM is becoming a database, and we're not using the logic of the CRM. We're using an AI agent to just mine the database of the CRM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it will bypass some of these things, like the whole emailing. Once this AI agent can send personalized emails, then the whole kind of email marketing, which is not very effective, as Jamie said, all these typical email sequences and email marketing, traditional email marketing, is not really effective. But if you send personalized, like a one-to-one style messages or emails, that works, and AI can do that.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I know we've used internally in Kyero, communicating with our agent clients, we've used HubSpot over the years, and we're talking to them in, I don't know, half a dozen different languages. And the limit for us has been the manual work in segmenting that database and choosing the message. But if an AI agent can help us do that, it really does open up some opportunities, I think. That's some super interesting stuff that you both mentioned. It sounds like the game is changing completely.
I think so.
The people are harder to market to, especially high-end buyers. Their level of expectation is higher. That a lot of people, they send an inquiry, You're phoning me off the back of, I didn't expect you to phone me. I asked for something, or, you offered something and I said, yes, I'll have it. And then you're phoning me rather than giving me what I want. These things don't really work anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Alfredo, I think we've got a fairly good picture from Jamie and Ash about what good practice looks like. But in your experience, what are agents actually doing today?
Very little. That would be the short version, the TLDR. It's I think lead follow up. Ash hit the nail on the head. There's two elements. There's lead follow up, which is the initial outreach to qualify the lead, and then there is we've qualified them, or they've just ghosted us, which is the majority of the leads. And what do we do now? And then you might have some sort of nurture thing for ones that have interacted, that have explained that they may be buying in the future. That's one path, and then the other path, which is the majority of agents' databases in reality here, where they never interacted with anything we sent them, but we paid handsomely for that lead, so we're going to hold on to it for dear life until they don't subscribe or tell us to delete them, right? So that's the real situation. Now, in terms of what agents do, I've done a lot of research on this over the years, and I can say that there are some quick wins for agents, and that is that most agents follow up way worse than what you even imagined they would do. So like days later, so what's a quick win? Do it the same day. What's another quick win? Do a phone call and an email and a WhatsApp. You're like, each of those steps puts you in like the top 10%, top 5%, top 2% of agents. So the agent that simply gets back to you in a timely manner and says, hi, Martin, thanks for inquiring about 123 Main Street. Here's the information you asked for. I wonder if I could have a chat with you, or whatever your follow-up might be from there. That's up to the company. That's lame. We've established that, but that's immediately better than what most agents are actually doing. We call it the 2 and 2, and that is 2 calls, 2 emails, off it goes to the newsletter, right? And that's the standard follow-up. And those 2 calls and 2 emails may take place over a period of a week, So I did some research in 2019, and we studied 10,000 leads over a period of a year, real estate leads, and 46% of leads came in after office hours, right? So sort of 6 till 8 a.m. the next day. I can say that in 15 years, 0 agents I've worked with have a different follow-up for those 2 scenarios. Why am I saying that? Well, because the main follow-up is give them a call. Well, there's nobody working. Who's calling them? If it's Saturday, who's calling them? If it's Sunday, who's calling them? So you immediately have a split of like half the time you're doing it wrong, even if you're doing it right. So just having the conversation, what should we do when we can't call them because it's Sunday? What could be the process there? Or it's Saturday afternoon, or it's even Saturday. Those conversations are, you did 2 and 2 and you did 4 and 4. You're immediately ahead of everybody else. You know what I mean? Even without doing anything else interesting, And the company has a responsibility of explaining a little bit more to an agent what goes behind that name, that phone number, and that email address, because I can assure you that in most cases, that's all the agent knows is, here's a number, here's a name. Maybe there's a message if they're lucky, if it's integrated correctly and it's got into the CRM. And they normally have a reference number of a property, if it's a resale, or a name of a development, if it's a new development. So all I have is Martin, here's your number, here's your email address. It's been forwarded to me from somebody in the office, normally manually, like a forward email, even if it goes directly into the CRM. And I get forwarded by somebody in the office, typically the sales director, but maybe the office manager if they don't have one. And I'm out doing viewings. And when I get back to my desk, I have a look at my inbox, and there is like a lead that came in this morning. And all I have is Martin, R12345, and this is where it gets funky. So every agent has their own follow-up. Typically, there's very few agencies that I've come across that actually have a company. This is the protocol you got to follow. There's plenty that I try to put in place, but very few actually manage it. They kind of have an attitude of like, I try it, but nobody does it, and you're thinking, well, that's your problem then. It's really is this bad. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to be positive that just by doing the obvious initial steps, you're going to go in the top 5%. There's 5 agents responding. 5 inquiries to 5 agents, like Jamie said. Then and I've done this research. I could tell you, like, oh, we fill. I did this. We did this with my team about 5 years ago. We filled in a hot lead in 100 agents' websites here, like as hot a lead as you can, on their website. So they're like, oh, it's considered a better quality lead with a comment. I'm Swedish. Here's my budget. This is what I'm looking to buy. I mean, it's just like on a plate. And we did it for 100 agencies. And how that went from this is the entry point to the what the low hanging fruit was is ridiculous. It was 10% of the forms didn't work. I couldn't submit the lead. Out of those, 5 people told us that we had to go into their office to have the conversation because they had to show us something important. 20% took more than a week to get back to us. And then when they got back to us, it was very much like, here's a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with what you put in your message. I mean, it was just so atrocious and so bad that you can go from being terrible to just being average, which is kind of the starting point of this conversation. You can beat your competition by just not being garbage at it. That's point 1. Point 2, I would say is, and I totally, it doesn't come into my head how you can expect agents to have their own follow-up process. These people are very good. The good ones are very good at product. They're very good agents. But what you expecting Rodrigo, who's been doing it for 35 years, to suddenly become a whiz at automation and follow-up and really have his own little way of doing it. So what you have is everybody does, and this is a generalization, but it's pretty common. Everybody has their own way of doing it. So within one company, if you're the lead, Martin, if Pepe answers or if John answers, you're getting a different follow-up. And that's mental because it's the wrong way around. The follow-up should be different depending on the lead, not depending on the broker, right? So if you filled in a form that says download the brochure for this on Facebook, it's not the same lead as you going onto a portal and saying, can you tell me if this includes the golf membership fees? There's 2 different reactions that are going to take place. The guy that just hasn't even received the brochure yet doesn't want to call because let me see the brochure at least, right? The person that's asked the question wants an answer. It doesn't want to have to wait 6 weeks to get it or no get it at all. I had one very quick real case scenario. I was working with a company and they would do the development. And we were working with the CRM and the follow-ups and all that. We put all the thing in place and we were reviewing how things were going. And so I come across a lead, which was very indicative. We had all the documents, all the brochures and stuff were done with tracked, which again puts you in the top 2% because most people send you a 7,000 gigabyte PDF that they're supposed to look on their phone. And so this is a real case. The lead had come in and the person had said, it's for high value, high ticket, good, good stuff, good name, good email, good everything. You got those details that you see when it comes in, this looks good. And the question had been, is in a golf resort, does it include the golf membership? I'm looking at the document they sent them, and I look at the communication. There's no answer to this question because all their emails are tracked. Again, that puts them in the top 5%, right? So this is like starting from a very low base, but they're in the top 5% for having it. And they're not answering it. And I'm looking through all this communication, further emails, and eventually I got hold of the salesperson and I said, look, this person's asked us to include the golf fee. And you could see in the CRM that they hadn't opened the document, the PDF, because it was tracked. Like it was, you could see it. They hadn't looked at it. And all these follow-ups were, I tried calling you, you didn't answer. Not to you. Come on then, speak to me, man. And I said, but yeah, nobody's answered this question. And they said, it's in the document. But he hasn't looked at the document. Like, just come on. And I could go on we had a 3-hour podcast. I could fill it with stories like that. The barrier to be good at this is in 2 stages. Stage 1, be better than your competition. Easy. Stage 2, let's do things that make sense. Let's have I can't fathom a world. If I took 15 years of talking with agents, I don't see any benefit in the brokerage needs to own the problem. The agency needs to own the thing. If you're going to give Billy, who's doing viewings, and you're just going to give him a phone number and a name, and it's always interested in R1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you got to tell him what's supposed to happen next. Like there's a thing called the lead generation gap, and I won't bore you with examples, but it's basically where marketing or the lead generator part of the equation is passing the lead way too soon, and with insufficient information to the broker to actually know what's supposed to happen next. So, we take the commission model that Jamie was talking about, which is all geared around if you don't sell today, you don't eat tomorrow. So that's just how it is. We're not going to change the industry. So knowing that as a broker, you kind of thinking, okay, what the agent really wants is that instead of sending me 50 leads that I got to work to death and just constantly feel guilty like I'm a kid not doing my homework because I haven't done my follow-up. There's loads of memes about this, about I've updated the CRM and all this sort of business. Is they want you, the agency, to do a little bit of work before they hand over that lead. And this is where automation and other things come into it. Give me a lead, tell me what they're expecting me to do with it, and give me the tools to do that. And if I don't need to do that part, then save me from that effort. And I think there's a term used, which is use automation and use machines to give you more time to behave more human. Because the final thing I'll say on this is that having looked at 1,000 follow-ups, the follow-ups are the metaphoric emptying of a giant lorry. You've inquired. They don't even know where you came from half the time. And they're basically going to go and get a window card or the equivalent of from their website of whatever it is you inquired about, and they're going to send you everything. So they can send you a PDF, a window card essentially. Then they're going to send you all the body of text of that listing and everything else. Maybe some links to some buyer's guide and God knows what else. You're going to get to the bottom of the email and you're going to be a year older. And they'll go, let me know if there's anything else I can help you with. That's the call to action. And that is super, super, super common. So I always want to highlight for agents that are listening to this, it's just get the basics right. And now let's get funky with what these guys are talking about.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, Alfredo, you're 100% correct. And I'm very conscious whenever I go into an agency, you can't go from 0 to 100. And you can't go from being unautomated or with very little follow-up to having like super complicated follow-up sequences on different sort of platforms and different kinds of outreach. But the bar to getting better is really, really small, right? And a lot of the times when I go into an agency and normally people call you in when there's problems, things aren't going as they expect and they want a solution to those problems. And one of the first things I do is, find out what the problems are, but then I say, show me your reward structure, how you reward the staff that work for you. And most of the time, the things that the people are unhappy about are exactly the things that they're rewarding. So just like with the brokers, like we've said, the brokers are rewarded to find the buyers that are ready to buy now. And that's what they're brilliant at. That is such a skill. And the good brokers, just like Ash said, these little signals, just by the tone of voice, the way they say something, you can tell, this person is really serious. The good brokers can pick up that over WhatsApp and over email really quickly. So we want to, like Alfredo says, let those guys do that. But I can't stress highly enough, the business has to take ownership of all of the follow-up and all of the nurturing and all of the processes. And that has to be done away from the brokers. Let the brokers be the brokers. Let them go and deal with the buyers that are ready now. And the business's job is to work with the brokers. The brokers have to play a little role in it, but the business's job is to try and create as many of those buyers as possible from the leads that we get. And the leads will always be bad, Martin. The leads will always be bad because the leads will never live up to our expectation as agents. Because like I said at the start, we want leads that are ready to buy now, waiting for us to phone them, ready to book the flight, ready to come and view the property. So the leads, most of them, the high majority of them will not be like that. So the leads will always be something that we wish they were better because it would make our lives easier. But they're just the leads. They're not bad. They're just leads. That's just what they are. So we have to have an acceptance of who we're marketing to and the leads that we're actually getting. And for me, I always find it really surprising that a business hasn't got a real, what Alfredo is saying, that the business owners who are paying large sums to generate these leads, like that's they have to own, because that's their cost per lead. That cost per lead that they're paying, there'll be an average cost across all their marketing platforms, and that average cost per lead, that's their outlay. They're outlaying that. So if they can put in processes which are going to look after those leads, because it doesn't matter what the lead is, it'll form part of your numbers. So if you can generate 10 and your numbers, that out of those 10, probably 20% will go on to buy something, maybe 30% will go on to buy something from somebody. and it's our job to try and get those 20 or 30% to buy through us, basically. And it's that business is a responsibility to take ownership of that process, to try and make sure that they're not burning those leads. Because if you're only dealing with the one or two that are ready now and you're throwing the rest in the bin, that's a very expensive way to run a business. Really expensive, because you've paid to get it. You've already got the lead. And I do know from the brokers that I've spoken to and worked with in Marbella that they say to me that a lot of the time when they sell a property, the amount of times that the buyer was already on their database is huge. I don't know if you've heard that, Alfredo, but the amount of times that they already had that buyer, but they ended up selling their property via another agent to a buyer that they actually had on their database originally.
For sure. I mean, the funny thing is that typically an agent will qualify or consider a hot lead, a lead that's got less than 0 to 3 months to buy. And typically the purchase sale is 6 months or more. So therein lies the issue. You know what I mean? It's just, but I think there are some quick ones even with the follow up. I think it's kind of just need to have a way of looking at, okay, where are these leads coming from? What are they expecting to happen? Is there anything we can do to support these agents before we pass them a lead? Are we passing these leads to them too soon? Could in the old days when there were the big mega firms here, you had telesales departments. So this wasn't as an obvious issue because you had a whole department whose only job in their life was to qualify the lead and turn it from an MQL to an SQL, if you like. And most agencies don't have that now. That's just the reality. There are some good reasons not to have them because you have that when you do have a lead that buys, you have that relationship all the way through to the end. And these brokers have a tremendous amount of market knowledge, so they are speaking to them. I think the thing to remember is that, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen, is brokers and firms don't want to automate the transaction, the selling. They want to find, if there's 2 in these 10 that are going to buy, they want tech to do that bit for them and say, can you identify accurately the 2 that are likely to buy? And then we could put our energy into those 2. At the moment, they're having to treat all 10 as if they're going to buy. And we know that's not the case. So we talked about this in the previous episode, they've got a huge failure rate baked into the whole process. And then there's a few other things that you get, which is, this came up in the conversation today, which is within agencies themselves, you have confirmation bias, which means that they will see the source of the lead. Normally in most, they could, even if just by how the email is, even if they're not going in a CRM, they could tell this is an Idealista lead, this is a Kyero lead, this is a Google Ads lead, this is a whatever lead, Meta, whatever. And they have their own opinions as to what good leads are, these brokers, based on their own experiences in other agencies or in this one. And so they will, you have the same agency has no difference in follow-up protocol between office hours or out of office hours. And we know the follow-up will be different because nobody's working 24/7. Then you have no difference in follow-up between this type of lead and that type of lead. So the meta lead might be more than capable of being converted, but it just requires maybe a different set of steps to follow them up. But then within the same agency, like I said before, you have different agencies have their own follow-ups of the thing. And then within that, each agent has their own opinion as to what a good follow-up looks like. So it does their own thing. So they believe in calls, they believe in emails, and they lean towards that. And then even further, it's the type of lead. So then, this is a lead from X location. And they will, I've spoken to sales directors of large companies that go, oh, those ones, we just tick the box to say we've done it, where there is a follow-up process, because they're crap. And I'm like, well, you just put in the bin 1,000 leads, buddy. Are you sure these are crap? And that's within a big organization. So it's frightening how messy it is. And a lot of the solutions are logical. You can't put the responsibility of the follow-up or the quality of the lead on the portal or the Google Ads supplier or the broker. It's the guy paying for it or the girl paying for it that has to come up with a solution. Now, that solution isn't honestly, the technical elements of it can be complicated. But the good news is most of the time, when you invest in that, it's fixed, it's sorted. You know what I mean? As in having saying, okay, how do we deal with portal leads? Whatever that conversation, however long that takes, whatever much you got to pay, an Ash to put something in place for you or a Jamie to teach your team how to follow these up. Once you got that process done, you're good to go. and then you tweak it. You tweak it for the next thing. Okay, we got a different source. We're going to try LinkedIn lead gen or whatever else. Which one should we adapt? How should we use it? And the fact is 99% of agencies that I've come across don't have any of that. Therefore, it's quite an easy way to.
That sounds like a good place to finish, Alfredo. It seems like the bar to be good is quite low, and that most agents and agencies can get a big step up with just by doing the basics. Let me go around you one at a time as a sign out. Ash, from your point of view, if an agent's listening to this and they're going, I don't think our lead follow-up is all it could be, what's the first thing you get them to start with? What's the basics from your point of view?
The first thing is to have that process in place. So have a good process like you need to follow in terms of what follow-up process, what's actually effective, which again, any good agency, they have enough data. If they measure the data, they know what's a good process in terms of achieving the results. But really, again, from my side, and also I wanted to add to everything I heard from Alfredo, I think the use of technology and automation, when done correctly, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's like in terms of AI, I've seen how an AI assistant can help remove some of the tedious part of the work. So a lot of the follow-up and activities that I'm hearing are not happening because some of this work is very manual, it's very tedious, and people don't like to do it. And it's money later, which is not enough motivator. And it's the tedious part, the manual repetitive work, which automation and a bit intelligent automation with AI added to it, like AI brain, can help them. So it works, it does that first leg of the qualifying. That's where AI is. That's where I would say start. Let AI qualify the lead, book the appointment for you, quite simply like a sales assistant would do. You hire a junior sales assistant to do that work, filter through all the leads, call them, qualify them, book an appointment. That's the standard sales process with the actual salesperson who's busy or the senior salesperson. So that first part, AI can do really well. An AI sales agent, there are lots of good tools now that can actually do it pretty quickly, a quick setup out of the box. But of course, there's more work involved if you want to integrate it with your CRM, etc.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, qualification sounds like a pretty quick win that can be automated. Well, how about you, Jamie? What's a quick win that you advise agents to get started with?
Well, I think that I would say to the agents, and I really feel for the owners of agencies, because the wasting of leads is probably where they leave the most meat on the table, is by the fact that they're just not handling the leads properly, and they have to treat them like gold. Think of the effort and the expense that we go to generate these leads when they come in, and it's the agency that has to do it, because the brokers won't, because as we've touched on before, they're not motivated, and they're also in most instances not paying for them. So like Alfredo says, if they decide one lead source is more hard work than the other, then they'll sign off from that one. So the business has to take responsibility for it. And I think one of the really quick wins they can have is, like I said at the start, assume that the person has inquired from 5 different businesses, not just yours. Assume that they are not going to be ready, and that they are going to be, it's an expression of interest. So, they're saying, look, I'm interested in this property potentially. If they've answered any questions, make sure that you deliver on them. Or if you have promised anything in your marketing, such as a guide or a sort of, a sort of brochure or whatever, make sure that you deliver on that, rather than just phoning them when they've, the advert said they were going to get something. But I would also say that they need to make sure that they have a clear process that makes the person understand who the company is, because they can assume that they've not visited your website. So if they're coming from a portal or coming from another marketing channel which isn't your website, assume that they know nothing about you, nothing about your business, and make sure that your follow-up and your initial sort of acceptance of their lead or recognition of their lead gives them some education about who you are, who your business is, so that when you do your next level of follow-up, or your broker does make that phone call, that they're much more likely to accept your call, or they're much more likely to reply to your email if they already know who you are. They feel like they know you a little bit, they feel they understand the business a little bit. And the way that you've gone back to them, if it sort of can try and promise that there is something in it for them, that you are the best option for them, that you can answer the problem that they have, or the search that they're carrying out, that you are the solution to that, rather than just a phone call. That follow-up means that your phone call will probably be more successful. And the other thing that I would say that agents can do straight away is start measuring everything to do with your leads. So where your leads are coming from, how many of those are turning into qualified leads, and like Ash mentioned, what process is working for you, how many of them are following up from WhatsApp, how quickly do you do it, what works with what you send, try some different things with different channels, and start measuring it so that you can try and get that cost per qualified lead down, basically, so you can qualify more of the leads that you're getting. And every process that you do, so if you're starting from zero, so if you've got zero follow-up, like Alfredo said a lot of people have, if you've got zero structured follow-up, shall we say, each time you put something in place, measure its effectiveness, because it's very surprising. We all think, well, this will work, and it actually doesn't, and something completely different works. And I would just say to measure it, because it's very easy to measure that, if you're clocking all your leads as they're coming in from the different channels, what your cost per qualified lead is from each channel and then overall, and then measure how many are being qualified, and also measure how quickly they get qualified, because it's great to be able to give the brokers an understanding of the average time to qualify somebody. So if brokers are expecting, well, this person's not calling me back within 24 hours. But if you say, well, the average qualification takes 7 days or takes 10 days, then they know that, okay, there's a little bit more patience needed here, or a little bit more that I can apply to it. So I would say they're the easy wins for the brokers straight out of the gate, is to make those assumptions. They don't know you, they don't know your company, they've inquired from 5 people, and they most likely won't be ready. But you need to get them onto the phone, build your process around that.
Awesome. Thank you. Alfredo, final words from you?
Use your CRM, like the owner. I'm talking to the owner here. Log into your own CRM. Don't just tell everybody they should be doing this and they should be doing that. Have a look inside yourself. If people can know that you're looking at what they're doing and what they're sending, they will do a better job. It's just human nature, right? Secondly, I would say, and this is kind of what Jamie was saying, is you have to benchmark the numbers. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad to start with. You just need to say, out of 100 leads from this source, we speak to 1 person, we speak to 10, whatever the number is. And from these people, this many book appointments, and this many go to sales, because that does 2 things for an agency. 1, it allows you to compare broker with broker. Our average over the last 2 years or 5 years in our company is 10% of this or 5% of that, and you're doing below that. So you're below our company average. And secondly, it allows you to then work on improving that. And then the third thing, I said 2, but there's 3, is then allows you, and this is super valuable for agents, allows you to try new lead sources, because you already have benchmarks of, typically out of 100 leads, we do X, Y, and Z. It gives you these like initial KPIs to be able to look at and go, typically from most of our lead sources, out of 100 leads that come in, we have 50 conversations, just to make a number up. And your lead source, I've had 100 leads and I've had 1 conversation. So I don't need to wait to get a sale to see something's different here. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but it's telling me I need to do something different, or I need to measure this differently. So just with looking at what's actually happening in your company and measuring the different steps of what your numbers are like, then you can do a hell of a lot. And that isn't hard. We're not talking any technical knowledge here. It's looking at what's being logged into your CRM. I think that would open eyes of many agents, many agency owners.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Alfredo. Thanks for joining us, Ash. Thank you to Jamie. This is a wrap for episode 6 of the first series of the Kyero Pro Podcast. We'll be back with season 2, and I think we've just scratched the surface. I'm looking forward to having some more conversations.